Alright everyone, we have to talk about this anti-diversity memo, so-called, that circulated within Google itself from apparently a senior software engineer, if I remember correctly. It is not an anti-diversity memo whatsoever. That term is wrong. That was concocted by people on the left that first covered it, and then everyone else just sort of latched on to the concept. But I'm telling you, and I'm only using that in the title, not as clickbait, but because everyone else is calling it that, so I figure, well, that's what they're searching for, unfortunately. It's actually a pro-diversity memo. If you actually bother to read the thing, you'll find out that it's talking about being in favor of diversity of opinion. What it's criticizing within Google is what is perceived as an echo chamber culture where some opinions are basically, they're suppressed, or they're considered taboo. That is, you're not supposed to talk about them. Even if a considerable number of the people working there or anywhere else have such opinions, you're not supposed to talk about them. You'll probably get canned if you do. And I can't imagine this employee will be at Google much longer. Even if there are people who responded positively and they're like, oh, yeah, and they nod their heads and they realize, yeah, that's a problem. What it points out is that within a corporate structure, you can have primarily a left or right, and this is more of a true dichotomy than left and right as applied to politics or society or something like that. There it begins to break down. It really is more along the lines of do you or do you not want to abuse people who have differing opinions. If you don't, then left and right begin to have far less meaning because, of course, you're not empowering abuse. Within a corporate structure, though, what the left represents is change, dynamism, and things of that nature. The right represents more of a hierarchical structure and stability. And these can both be positive and they can both coexist, and that makes a healthy company. However, when one side is unduly suppressed, the company, for instance, a company goes far right, it will stagnate. It's too stable. It's not capable of changing. It will be outmaneuvered by its competitors, potentially. It's too hierarchical. It can become abusive in a top-down manner. On the left, you've got the opposite problem. You have arguably too much change, thus instability. You're changing things in a wanton manner. You end up pissing off part of your user base, potentially, if you're a tech firm, because you've made too many changes in too short a span of time, and you've begun to suppress, people on the other side in a political sense as well. This can happen in both directions. You also have the concept that you can have bottom-up abuse. That is, some grassroots group of people haranguing can force the company, because it's dynamic anyway, it feels very compelled towards change, and so you can actually get part of the user base abused by another part, and that's basically what we see on YouTube especially. Although I will say, even with YouTube's changes, it's still less abusive than Facebook. That should have Mark Zuckerberg worried. Like there's no debate. Everyone at Facebook seems to agree, yeah, we need to police state this bitch up constantly. But it's not an anti-diversity memo. It's only anti-artificial diversity for PR purposes, and I'll tell you what's happening with these tech firms. In part, this isn't the whole story, but this is part of it. I'll cover more later, which goes more onto the social side. What's happening is that companies want to make money. And the false consensus of society, that is, if you listen to those that are the most rabid, the most angry and triggered, and which speak with the greatest fervor, you would think that the consensus of general American or Western reality was in favor of total progressivism, suppressing people with so-called anti-progressive opinions, in favor of censorship, in favor of, diversity just for diversity's sake, and was generally against the concept of a meritocratic system either in the boardroom or in the government. That's actually a false consensus of reality. That's the consensus because they've managed to browbeat people who oppose that into silence. And that's beginning to change, which is why you should probably be optimistic. All the problems that you're seeing right now are part of a greater social structure that will pass by the wayside. We're beginning to see it denigrated now. Censoring opinions that are naughty or offensive, it's not going to do anything. Yeah, the future actually looks bright, but you have to go through the dark ages before you get the Renaissance, so to speak. So I'll talk more on that later. This memo is fundamentally right. A company can be too far to the right, resist all change, stagnate, and die. A company can be too far to the left, and again, in the corporate sense, it can change too much in too short a span of time, allow bottom-up abuse, alienate people, potentially they cancel a service that's very popular because they're so dynamic as a company. We saw this with MySpace, as opposed to Facebook. Facebook was more, oddly enough, early on, took the more conservative approach, was more stable, grew more slowly. MySpace makes big, rapid changes and pisses everybody off and collapses. They actually were the victim of a leftist corporate mentality in that sense, at least according to the categories laid out by this memo. I'm not sure I agree 100% with the categorization system. And then you have the aspect, in general, of corporations just hiring someone who happens to be female or minority or whatever, just for the sake of saying that they're in the boardroom. This is a PR strategy that works well for the progressives, but ultimately it should be seen, and I think in the future will be seen, as just pandering. That is, the people doing this are themselves sexist and racist. And they just happen to be on the left. They're aiming it at the other group, the dominant group, which is white people in general, males in general, or supposedly they're dominant anyway. They just aim it at another group. And it's the same concept. It's basically 50s white male Americana flipped on its head. It's the same thing. And it'll be seen the same in the future. When we look back, often to a real important concept. In fact, I'm just going to roll it up in this fucking video. I'm not going to make a separate video. I'll make my predictions and talk about moral panic. The inversion of diversity thing, I'm just going to roll it up into this video. Fuck the other one. It's too important to have its own video. You need to pay attention here. Every single society, every single stage of humanity worldwide, without end, forever, has always looked back and failed to recognize that the way we see the past from the present is going to be the way that the present will be seen when it becomes part of the past. When we see ads today, when people on the far right, they look and they say, the progressives are trying to destroy us forever. The ads that they're making that depict white males as being dumb and uncouth, relying upon their girlfriend for their basic survival because otherwise they'd be sitting on a milk crate, they wouldn't know how to cook anything, they wouldn't know how to do anything. They're relying on their black friend to keep them hip to pop culture because otherwise it'd be totally boring. They can't dance, they can't jump, they can't do anything. So they need basically a glorified wingman who happens not to be white. All the idea of straight people being, boring, and here's this gay man and he's really cool and hip and has better style. Those are going to be seen the same way we see Flintstones Winston ads from the 1950s in a few decades. I can guarantee you that that's exactly how they'll be seen. As a relic of a bygone era. We don't even have to look back that far. We look back at the 1990s and say that ads and TV shows and things were out of step. They're no longer hip. They represent a dead ideology. They represent sort of, it's the symbol of a past era. And change is inevitable. Dynamism over time is inevitable. Every successive generation sees the past as uncool. Occasionally you get a retro movement and then, one or more of the past generations is suddenly hip in a new form. Like right now we certainly see that. With some of the past eras, there is a resurgent sort of early atomic feel within some parts of culture. Look at Review Bra. He dresses like it's the 1950s, and he's cool. He's one of the younger, cool people. Online, of all places, in the super communications age, he's fucking cool. He looks like he's at an old folks home or something, and yet he's hip. There you go. It's the same thing. I gain popularity. What decade am I dressed like it is? I'm stuck in the 1980s. That's all I listen to. YouTube as a jukebox, by the way, has helped to shape this part of our culture. And it's going to keep going. It's not going to stop. Society, once you stagnate, that's when you're dead. So I wouldn't be too concerned about the false diversity of the current era. It will come to be seen as outdated in the future. So don't be too concerned. All you have to do is not be intimidated. I'll cover that more later. As far as the memo, though, the idea of simply hiring people who happen to be female or person of color or whatever for the sake of hiring them without a tip of the hat to their merits, as opposed to some white male or a white person or male in general who might run for the same position, they're applying to the same position, will inevitably fall by the wayside. It will inevitably be scrapped in favor again of merit-based hiring, and then in the future it'll change form again. Maybe they'll start hiring androids or something like that. Then you'll have a big stink about that. Oh, it'll happen over and over until the end of humanity itself at some indeterminate time in the future. The memo is fundamentally correct, and it is not anti-diversity. Nowhere in this memo does it say, oh, we should stop hiring women, we should stop hiring black people. No, it's saying hire people based on merit. If the response of the social justice warriors, let me ask you this, to the implementation of a merit-based only system is to whine about racism and sexism, what are they actually saying about people who are not white and or not male? What are they actually intoning there? They're saying that they're inferior, that in a merit-based system they can't prosper, that that's evil, that there's something wrong with it. I think you're going to come to see that that line is no longer appreciated so much as it is maybe now among large swaths of society, and the internet will have a driving force in determining this. Opinion is beginning to shift away from social justice warriordom. It's beginning to lean more and more heavily against that kind of moral haranguing. It's only a matter of time before the paradigm fully flips over. So yeah, a little bit about this Google Manifesto. It's not fascism, it's not racism, it's not sexism, it's merit-based. If you see that as fascism, you've got problems. If you see it as racist or sexist, you may want to redefine your opinions of what these things apply to. You may want to redefine how you see people who are not white and or not male if you think they can't compete in a merit-based system. I submit that you are obsessed with the topic. Some of these people, it's basically all they ever talk about. It's really, it's hysterical. They don't even realize, I think, they think that because they're giving positive affirmations to, traditionally marginalized groups, that somehow it changes the dynamics of what they're actually saying. And then in time, when white males become a marginalized group, are they going to start propping them up? No, because those people are stuck in their la-la land, stuff like that. But the memo itself is not anti-diversity. It is pro-diversity. It's simply saying let's have a diversity of opinions within the company so we can outcompete others and make more money. Just sort of makes sense. That's about all. Peace out.